Today, we will be surviving 7 days in one of the most unique horror survival games out right now, Once Human. Once Human is a free-to-play, multiplayer, open-world survival game set in a strange post-apocalyptic future with multiple scenarios and game modes. It has it all: survival, crafting, base building, deep gun customization, vehicles, and much more, all wrapped in this unsettling cosmic horror world filled with twisted creatures and genuinely terrifying bosses. In this video, I'm starting from absolutely nothing with the goal of surviving for 7 days in the game's world. If I die once, the run is over. And I'm not just going to sit in my base and play it safe. The goal is to gear up fast, get strong enough, and actively hunt down some of the scariest bosses in the game before the week is over. I've had this game on my radar for a while now, and clearly I'm not the only one. It's one of the most wishlisted and most played games on Steam, so I was genuinely excited when the Once Human team reached out to sponsor this video. And honestly, it's the perfect time to jump in, since they have added a ton of new content recently with brand new monsters and bosses and the ability to loot monster heads that grant powerful abilities. You actually need these heads to survive in heavily polluted zones and hunt down special monsters that drop exclusive loot. So if you like what you see today, you can try Once Human completely free using the link in the description. Now, let's see if I survive the week. First, character creation. You guys know me, I will be playing the most mercenary looking dude every chance I get, and his name? Large Employer. I was thrown into the world and immediately started scouting while gliding down. I was scoping out locations of key resources, wood, stone, ore, and wildlife, as well as a good spot for my base. Before long, I found the perfect spot for a base right next to a river, surrounded by everything I'd need. I placed a foundation and got to work harvesting resources. The early base came together quickly. I built a furnace to refine ore, a disassembly bench to scrap junk into useful materials, then I added a gear bench for weapons and armor, plus a basic workbench for essentials. For weapons, I crafted a machete, strong for my level and reliable for a long time. I also crafted an AKM with some ammo to handle ranged fights. After that, I upgraded the base, proper walls, window frames, a door, and a roof over my head. Nothing fancy, but it will do the job. Armor was the next priority. I needed animal hides, and I remembered spotting deer while gliding in, so I headed out to hunt. I found the same deer I spotted earlier, lined up my shots, but they got spooked. I glided after them, chased them down, and managed to kill all 3. After harvesting though, I realized the hides were only enough for a copper pickaxe, which I needed badly. Instead of hunting again, I decided to clear a nearby point of interest. Those usually have loose loot and junk I could scrap for clothing material. The area was absolutely crawling with zombie-like creatures, some flying, bug-like enemies, and corrupted humanoids, but they weren't a real threat. AKM handled ranged and the machete cleaned up the rest. Inside I found plenty of loot. Back at the base, I disassembled everything and finally crafted pants and shoes, so I wasn't running around barefoot anymore. Seeing how profitable that was, I headed out to scavenge more. During a run, I found a message left by another player telling me to scan the area for treasure. I did, and an ethereal chest appeared. It was a deviation. Deviations are creatures with unique powers you can defeat or tame. Once contained, they grant powerful bonuses. Some are combat focused, others are passive. This one transformed items you deposit into it every hour into useful gear and resources. I secured it and headed home. With the new materials, I crafted a clean jacket and a cap. The mercenary look was actually complete. Next on the list was food and water. Hunger and thirst were stacking some annoying debuffs and I had to get rid of them. For food, I built a stove and grilled the deer meat that I'd harvested earlier. And for water, I lived right next to a river, so I gathered tainted water from it and boiled it into clean drinking water. Just like that, we had food and water. For the rest of day 1, I explored the surrounding area. I ran into a literal bus with massive arms patrolling the road. Shooting the body did nothing, but targeting the arms eventually brought it down. Once disabled, I climbed inside to loot a chest. Disabling the bus triggered a wave of enemies to defend it, but the machete made short work of it. Further out, I spotted a farm that looked promising. I glided in, cleared the enemies, and looted the place. I found a weapon crate with a rusty pipe. It was decent, but my machete was better. There was also a mystical crate packed with valuable resources, so I took all that loot and I headed home. On the way, I was reminded that this was a horror game. At first I thought I was tripping, but this scarecrow was definitely following me every time I was looking. Seeing that it couldn't be damaged, I skedaddled out of there fast. Back at the base, I disassembled everything, which gave me enough materials to craft gloves and gather more building resources. I added a few finishing touches to the base, reinforcing it and tightening up the layout. By the end of day 1, I was fully geared, fully fed, hydrated, and living in a sturdy, functional base. At the start of day 2, after upgrading my base, crafting a shotgun, and stocking up on ammo, I headed to a nearby community that supposedly had a job for me. When I arrived, I spoke to the leader, Maria, who recognized me as a mayfly, people capable of defeating and controlling deviations. She told me a powerful deviation was causing chaos in the region and wanted me to deal with it. She pointed me toward a merchant whose convoy had disappeared. They suspected the deviation was involved. The merchant explained that her scout knew the convoy's last known location. If I wanted answers, I'd have to talk to him. They also gave me this sick bike which made traveling a lot easier. I met up with the scout who tracked the convoy's tracks to a nearby compound. I cleared out monsters, grabbed some decent loot. While searching for clues, I found notes mentioning a mysterious deviation at a place called Rotten Manor. Someone from the black market was offering a huge amount of money for it, and using my ability to witness traces of past conversations, I located the exact spot where the convoy debated whether to hunt down the deviation in Rotten Manor or not. Turns out they really needed the money, so they did go. Now I knew where they went. Exploring the rest of the area, I found a weapon crate containing what would become my favorite deviation of the run, the Xeno Purifier. Back home, I built a containment unit, placed the samurai-looking deviation inside, and learned its abilities. It was a combat deviation with 2 skills. The first is a dash that you could store 2 uses of, which was extremely useful for mobility and will prove to be essential in my kit. The second summons the samurai for 15 seconds. His attacks apply gun vulnerability, increasing my damage, and deals 3,500% physical damage himself. For the bosses that I was going to be facing, that's massive. With the samurai equipped, I headed to Rotten Manor. When I arrived, I set up a small camp, cooked some food and prepared to rush in. Inside, I found what remained of the convoy. Their bodies were trapped in some kind of gel mid-fight. Investigating triggered the boss encounter with the Ravenous Hunter. This version was only a doppelganger, a shadow of whatever actually killed them. I was basically fighting their memory of the battle. He wielded a massive minigun that could shred my HP if I wasn't careful. And getting too close was just as dangerous due to its heavy melee swings. Keeping my distance and playing it safe, moving from cover to cover made the fight manageable, and I took him down without too much trouble. After looting the area and picking up a decent bulletproof vest, which wasn't as good as my jacket, I returned to Maria. While I was tracking the convoy, she'd located the real deviation inside the laboratory or something like that. They referred to the place in the game as the monolith. These monoliths are where all the main bosses are located in. I headed there next. The entrance was heavily guarded, but with careful kiting and some solid shooting, I pushed through. Right outside the entrance, I encountered a brutal mini-boss called the Glutton. Getting close to this thing was super dangerous because it triggered its devastating melee attacks, and from a distance it launched ranged attacks that sometimes spawned additional enemies. It's a pretty challenging enemy, but targeting its weak points brings it down pretty fast, and then you can do some massive damage while it was completely helpless. With that cleared, I moved deeper into the lab to face the real Ravenous Hunter. Apparently, the hunter had absorbed the convoy, taken their weapons, and turned into a gel-infused monster. His primary attack was a relentless minigun barrage, and you would have to stay in cover until the minigun overheated, and then you would punish the Ravenous Hunter in this short opening. Repeating this would eventually blow up the minigun arm and would stun him for a bit. Once 2 health chunks are down, he enters an immune phase, retreating and spawning 2 nests that continuously produced enemies, but destroying the nests would take away his immunity and would bring him back into the arena. If you break his minigun arm, you can pick it up and use it, but it slows you down heavily, and if you are out of cover, it turns into a minigun slugfest, but you all know me, I am built different. Once his arm breaks, he swaps to a rocket launcher with homing missiles. They hit really hard and you need some precise positioning from cover to dodge it. Keeping the pressure on and with the samurai dealing massive damage, I eventually brought him down. He dropped a cool beret and a loot crate containing a heavy machine gun, which I won't be using because I really like my AKM. After some quick aura farming, I left the dungeon victorious. Back at the base, I contained the deviation and the ravenous hunter was now conquered. I returned to the community, delivered the news, and brought back what remained of the merchant's supplies. I collected my reward, and I was given information about another settlement that was struggling with another deviation. Before heading out, I built a machine in my base that uses in-game resources from a minigame that rewards gear. This unlocked me a solid new armor that was very stylish. I then tossed some items into the wishing box to let it cook, and with that, day 2 was officially conquered. For day 3, I decided to do a little gamble. My idea was simple. Hit areas way above my level and see if I could snag some overpowered gear early. I started at a railway junction crawling with enemies. This place was stacked with loot, and I even found this sick looking mask, but it was unfortunately too high level for me to equip. I pocketed it for later. The area had some really unique enemies, like for example this massive fire-based brute called the Scorcher, and another monstrosity with a drill for a head, which I didn't even get close to, I just took it out from a distance. After fighting through these waves of enemies, I secured the junction and moved on to a nearby town. Discovering the new area gave me just enough XP to level up and finally equip the mask, and yeah, I was looking cool as hell. The moment I entered town on my bike, I heard voices, and before I could react, I was getting shot at. Yep, high-level bandits. Instead of running away, I channeled my inner Chad, got behind some cover, and started blasting. I used the shotgun for close-range damage, and then overwhelmed enemies with my machete. Moving aggressively from cover to cover and keeping my fights as close range as possible. The tight urban setting was doing a lot of work, and this playstyle was super satisfying and rewarding. The CQC heavy approach worked, and I absolutely tore through these bandits despite the big level gap between us. The town was packed with them, from shotgunners to heavily armored units, and there were even snipers posted on the roofs, which could absolutely one-shot me if they landed a shot. But staying mobile and moving from cover to cover, keeping the fights close, completely neutralized their advantage. After pushing through most of the town, I ran into a couple of other players, and together we wiped out the rest of it. While looting, I found a player message next to a gear crate. Inside was a level 3 armor, which was insanely strong but locked until level 20, and the message pointed me toward a weapons chest nearby. I checked it out and found an automatic shotgun which was completely broken. It did so much damage, it was ridiculous, but alas, it is also tier 3 and completely unusable for me. That's when it hit me. Farming these areas that are massively over-leveled is not efficient because I can't even use the gear that I find. So I slipped out through the back of a supermarket into the woods, and I headed down to a smaller church town that was better suited to my level. This place was swarming with monsters. I ran into this glutton that was surrounded by a lot of mobs, which made the fight very messy, but nothing a couple of well-placed frag grenades couldn't take care of. I secured the chests in this area, grabbed some solid materials for upgrades, and headed home. Back at the base, I spent a good chunk of time disassembling loot, crafting, and upgrading, and by the end of it, my main weapon was upgraded to tier 2, and most of my armor pieces as well. I was stacked. For day 4, I went to check what the next community had for me. On the way there, I ran into Emma. The previous settlement had mentioned that she disappeared and that the new camp was looking for her. I spoke to her and she explained that she'd been searching for her friend Brianna, who had left camp earlier. During the search, Emma was ambushed and badly injured. I found her some medical supplies and told her to return to camp, and that I'd investigate and meet her there. I reached the settlement and met the leader. She explained that something strange was happening in their town. Anything pregnant, human or animal, was turning into a tree. They were certain a deviation was responsible. Brianna seemed connected to it somehow, so I asked Emma where she had last been seen, and she pointed me toward a nearby chemical plant that Brianna was holed up in after she was cast out of the community. At the plant, I used my ability to trace past events. I saw that Brianna, pregnant, received a book from a mysterious stranger. After taking it and reading it, she became infected, and slowly others in the camp, specifically pregnant women, began showing signs of the same infection. Following the trail, I learned that she had fled to a bunker. I fought my way inside and found her notes, and the moment I examined them, I was pulled into another dreamlike sequence. There were trees everywhere, and I had to fight my way through a lot of tree sentry looking enemies. The sequence ended with a doppelganger of the region's boss, the Treant. It was massive but slow. Up close it had really bad melee attacks, but since it is big and slow, it should never catch you unless you are genuinely trying to die. At range, it fired a sweeping laser that you could avoid by constantly moving, and some explosive orbs that had to be shot mid-air before they reached you. Since this was only a shadow version, the fight wasn't too difficult. After defeating it, I learned the location of the true prime deviation, and I returned to my base to prepare for the real fight. For day 5, I focused on optimization. Before taking on the Treant, I wanted my gear maxed out, but this time I wasn't repeating the day 3 mistake. No more over-leveled zones, and I was sticking to areas appropriate for my level. Before heading out, I built a tier 2 sniper rifle, which was going to be huge for the upcoming fights. The first stop was the chemical plant from earlier. I went back in and completely ransacked it this time. It was packed with monsters, but at this point, they were child play for me. Next was Sunbury, a bandit-controlled town. These bandits, however, were lower level than the ones I'd fought earlier, so the fights were a breeze. They did have one dangerous variant in this town though, which are these deviant enhanced melee bandits. When they power up, they grow larger and start moving insanely fast and doing a lot of damage, but you would just keep your distance, hide them around, whittle them down with ranged attacks. Once it wore off, I'd close in and finish them in melee. Defeating a couple of them dropped a deviant head, which is the source of their power. I equipped it, and apparently this would let you enter polluted areas without taking sanity damage, along with a few other bonuses. This was huge if you wanted to tackle on timed events and areas where there was pollution and sanity damage and stuff like that. I actually did try these deviant zones that these heads are designed for, which is a new gameplay element in the newest update of the game. These zones pop up all over the map with insanely strong variants of bosses and mini-bosses with much tougher enemies, but with really good loot and rare resources spawning in these dangerous zones. Existing in these zones does do sanity damage, so you do need a deviant head in order to enter and spend an extended amount of time in the zone. In my personal experience with these zones, which I checked out after I was done recording my 7-day run, you gotta bring some friends or be really kitted out and prepared. The first zone I checked out, you can tell immediately once you enter these zones because of the change in atmosphere. I tracked down the boss, but most of my attacks were not even piercing, and it was out healing all my measly damage, and in return I was having to constantly dodge what I assumed would probably one-shot me. So I got the hell out of there. The second zone spawned in the middle of a compound that made it feel like I was breaking into a stronghold, with the zone making the enemies pretty OP but still manageable. And when I get to the boss, it looks pretty sick. It was a variant of a mini boss that I ran into earlier in my run, but this one had more abilities and was an absolute tank. Seeing how strong and fast it is, I also chose to retreat and decide against deviant zones for now. I looted all the major chests in the area, grabbing all the gear and essential supplies, and while clearing this tower on top of a school, I noticed that another player was being pinned down by a sniper, so using my sniper rifle, I handled it for him. With Sunbury fully cleared, I hopped back on the bike and returned home, and after processing all the loot, I upgraded everything. By the end of it, I had tier 2 gear in every slot, which is the highest possible tier at my current level. Both weapons and armor, by the way. I was fully optimized and ready for the Treant. Day 6 was the day the Treant was going down. Before heading out, I stocked up on a ridiculous amount of ammo and modded my weapons for maximum damage and some added effects. Fully prepped, I hopped on the bike and set off. On the way there, I ran into what looked like some kind of heavily armed military unit. They had tons of firepower and some solid armor, and while they did catch me by surprise, I did cut through some of them and kept riding my bike until it ran out of fuel just short of the objective, so I ditched it and pushed the rest of the way on foot. Once inside, I entered the Treant's realm. The Prime version was more massive than the Shadow version I'd fought before. The core mechanics were pretty similar, but the major twist is that it spawned 3 trees every now and then across the arena, and while those were active, the Treant was completely immune to damage. On top of that, it spawned some regular mobs to defend the trees. So clearing the mobs, destroying all 3 trees, and once they were down, the Treant became vulnerable for 120 seconds, which is all I needed. Its weak spot was the red glow at the top of its head. That's where the damage had to go if you want to really optimize your damage. Its laser attack was really deadly if it tracked you for too long, so it was vital that you keep moving. And the explosive white orbs were really dangerous as well, so you had to take them down before they hit you. Luckily, my gear was fully optimized with tier 2 equipment across the board, and my samurai was absolutely shredding the Treant. The Treant went down, dropped some solid loot including another tier 2 AKM, and with that, this region was conquered as well. I returned to the community, reported my victory, and collected my reward. Back at the base, I finished its construction, added some upgrades, and placed down some proper furniture, as well as some decoration. It was super cozy now. I also unlocked some new equipment and crafted some upgrades immediately, and by the end of day 6, the Treant was defeated, the Ravenous Hunter was defeated, my gear was maxed for my level, and I had this cool, awesome base. For day 7, I got greedy. I thought I already took down 2 main bosses. 2 regions were liberated, so I figured, why not go for the next one straight away? I stocked up on an absurd amount of ammo, I repaired and refueled my bike, and I headed out. After roaming for a while in this new region, which was recommended for level 30 players, for context I was level 15, I spotted a beacon in the sky. That must be the monolith, I thought. So I rode there. It led to a massive research facility that looked like a nightmare to navigate. The enemies were probably way above my level as well, so I didn't go through it. Instead, I noticed a hill overlooking the monolith on the side of the entrance to the region's boss arena. So I found the route to the hill, I made the jump, and I skipped the entire compound. I got inside the monolith and I was teleported into the arena. That's when I remembered once more that this is a horror game.
What do you suppose we ring around the rosy, ring around?
This is Araxiam, recommended for multiple players who are level 30. Just to remind you, I was level 15. Even dumping magazines into it barely moved the health bar. This was not like the other 2 bosses. Meanwhile, any attack from Araxiam would absolutely one-shot me. Araxiam had some truly oppressive attacks. First, it fired webs that would one-shot you, and even if they missed, they stayed on the ground, and if you step on them later, you are trapped. It launched poison that denied huge sections of the arena. It would charge at you with insanely aggressive melee attacks that would absolutely one-shot you, and it rained down web artillery non-stop. It was also constantly laying eggs that spawned small spiders, and they would swarm and explode on contact, staggering you and poisoning you, and killing those eggs immediately was really mandatory if you didn't want to lose your mind. With constant movement and careful spacing and help from my MVP, the GOAT, the Samurai, I managed to chunk 2 bars off its health. This triggered its invulnerability phase. Basically, Araxiam climbed to the central pillar and became immune, and then spawned 4 eggs outside of the arena, continuously pumping out little spiders. You had to destroy at least 3 of these before Araxiam would be forced to rejoin the fight. And this is where the tier 2 sniper really carried. Since the eggs were out of the arena and the sniper had high damage per bullet, it would prove invaluable in taking down those eggs very fast. While I shredded the eggs one by one, Araxiam was still shooting web artillery that would one-shot me. Thankfully, I was constantly looking between the eggs and the boss, so it didn't catch me off guard, and at some point I didn't even need to look at it anymore because I just listened for the sound. Once the eggs were down, Araxiam dropped back in. Half health, it used its deadliest move, a homing web projectile with a brutal hitbox. If it connected, it dragged you straight in for an instant kill. And yep, it caught me. I went down, but thankfully I had adrenaline shots, which act as revives if you had no teammates. I burned through my first shot, but you only get 3 per boss, so I had to make the other 2 count. I kept up the aggressiveness. But alas, I was caught again, and I burned through my second adrenaline shot. Chunking off 2 other chunks of health from Araxiam put it through another immunity phase, but I took down the eggs very fast and we entered the last 2 chunks. Araxiam was almost dead, and I was on my final adrenaline shot. There was no room for error here. I played absolutely perfectly with constant movement and dodging, and I was applying non-stop pressure as well. When its health dropped low, I summoned the samurai for a load of burst damage, so I was summoning him every chance I got. Those 15 seconds where he is summoned, every single slash he did dealt like 4,000 damage, so he was absolutely doing work. Araxiam would also focus him every time he was fighting it up close, so that gave me a lot of room to breathe. I swapped to my sniper, I focused, and jackpot. I took Araxiam down. It dropped an insane tier 3 sniper rifle, which was a massive upgrade, but I couldn't use it because I was too low level. I aura farmed in the end screen, and look at that, over 100,000 damage dealt in that fight alone. And if you are thinking, wow, Simo, you are a beast of a gamer, I took down this boss 3 times. The first 2 times, OBS was absolutely losing its mind. For the first time, I had the OBS paused and I didn't even notice. And for the second one, it was refusing to record the game while I thought it was still recording. So I had to do it a 3rd time just to prove to you guys that I am built different. Got back to the base, restocked my ammo, repaired everything, cooked up proper meal, and upgraded the base a bit more, because after that fight, I absolutely earned a nice base to chill at. Day 7 ended with a level 30 boss dead at level 15. So if you want to try this challenge yourself, or just jump into the game either solo or with your friends and see how long you can last, you can play Once Human completely free using the link in the description. I was genuinely pleasantly surprised with this game, and I am sure you will be as well. And as always, thank you all for watching, and thank you Once Human for supporting the channel.